What's up, team? This is going to be the final episode of my review of Patrick Winston's public speaking class from MIT. We're not going to watch this whole video because it's just going to take forever. Instead, I'm just going to jump through different sections to see if I can find stuff that he's doing really well that I agree with, and see if I can find some stuff that maybe I can help clarify a little more. This is a really great guy, and I feel really bad about being kind of mean here. But the number one thing that you got to know about this video that we're about to watch, if I was going to summarize it all for you, it would be this. Lots of ideas with almost no follow through. Lots of great anecdotes without any tactics. Lots of theory, very little application. So let's just get started, man. Let's just do this. Hashtag and boring. Okay.
That's what fourth idea might be here, an idea that helps people get back on the bus.
An idea that helps people get back on the bus. An idea that helps people get back on the bus. An idea that brings people back to get engagement. I'm going to say either silence or a question. But here's the thing. Most people, I don't know, most people say stuff like, ask a question. And that's it. But if you're like me, you're like, what kind of question? Yeah, no, duh, but what? Right? Or he might say silence. He might say silence. But like, if he says silence, how much silence? Let's find out.
Ask a question. Yes. Thank you.
Now, is he going to tell us what kind? Like, is he going to
ask a question?
Okay. Ask a question. Oh my God.
And so I will ask a question. How much dead air can there be? How long can I pause?
You know, that's a really interesting question. Like, how long can you pause for? Like, after you ask a question? I mean, honestly, for me, it depends. Are you asking a question to get an answer, or are you asking for a rhetorical question? See, for me, if I'm asking a question to get an answer, I'll just wait for as long as it takes. Sooner or later, out of awkwardness, probably usually about after like 5 seconds, someone's going to answer. But dude, I will tell you, if you've ever asked a question and had to wait 5 seconds, it feels like it takes forever.
7 seconds.
Oh,
it seems like an eternity.
Sure.
To me.
Honestly, it's just until someone answers. Otherwise, it's a rhetorical question and you wait 2 seconds. There, boom. But what kind of questions should we ask? Mr. Winston, are you going to help us there?
For 7 seconds, but that's the standard amount of time you can wait for an answer. And of course, the question has to be carefully chosen. It can't be too obvious because then people will be embarrassed to say what the answer is. Can't be too hard because then nobody will have anything to say.
It can't be too obvious and it can't be too hard. Please give me some examples, or get more specific. What does that even mean? So let me give you some things that I would say. If you want to ask a question to get people re-engaged, here's right off the bat, these questions will always work. These questions will always work. Why am I telling you this? Why should you care? If you ask those either of those questions, everyone's going to go like this. Do you want an answer? That's what they're thinking, which means you got them back. So you can wait for an answer or you cannot wait for an answer. Either way, boom, you got it right there. Now, topic specific questions. Here's what you got to do. If you're having a hard time getting reactions, first, ask a yes or no question with show of hands. How many people can think of some examples of this? Okay, 20. Okay, everyone with their hands up, can one of you give me an answer? Right away, you're going to get an easier response. That's if you have a hard time.
So here are some sample heuristics you can put in your armamentarium and build up your repertoire of ideas about presentation.
Sure.
And now, if this persuades you that there is something to know, that there is knowledge, then I've already succeeded. Because what I want to convince you of is that if you watch the speakers you admire and feel are effective, and ask yourselves why they're successful, then you can build up your own personal repertoire and develop your own personal style.
Yeah, no kidding. But can you give us some examples of some speakers and give us specific tactics that they're using that is why they're successful? So for example, you could talk about the concept of repeating one phrase. The first thing that pops into my head is when Barack Obama first did a speech before he was president, he talked about the audacity of hope, the audacity to believe, blah, 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 the audacity to say, blah, blah, blah. He stacked a phrase, meaning he repeated a phrase 3 times, 3, 2, 4, doesn't matter. But he repeated it several times and boom, 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 with a different ending. That is an effective tactic. Will you identify some tactics for me, sir? Or will you just say, find things that you like and try and figure out what they mean and then try and apply them to your situation? Which is what everyone says, which is why soft skills are so hard to quantify.
And that's my fundamental.
But not with us.
So what do you think is a good time to have a lecture? 11 a.m.
Yes, you are technically correct. Being able to control the time and place is very important. But you will never get to do that. Listen, you're talking to students right now, right? You're a prof student. Maybe you're working, whatever it is. But here's the thing. Tell me if this is not true. You never get to choose when you speak. Your teacher says, here's when we're going to be having presentations. Here's the schedule. Who wants to go first? Like that's pretty much it. You might say like within this class, he might say who wants to go, but chances are they'll schedule it. And here's the thing. You can't choose when the class is. How often when you're working that someone else sets up a meeting, do you be like, you know what, if I'm going to speak, I'd rather have this meeting on this day and this time. Maybe, but 9 out of 10 times, you can't choose when and where you speak. It's kind of like, here's when we're having the meeting, here's when we're having the presentations, and then all you can do is within that time. Could you imagine, I'm just thinking, could you imagine being like in your finance class or being in like your career preparation class or something, and they're saying, hey, we're going to be doing a session tomorrow at 4 p.m. You're like, no, I would like you to change this to 11 a.m. so that I can attend and be at my awakest. They're going to be like, well, tough cookies, Poppy.
The problem with the other kinds of rooms is that we humans, whenever the lights go down, or whenever the room is dimly lighted, it signals that we should go to sleep. So whenever I go somewhere to give a talk, even today, the first thing I do when I speak to the audiovisual people is say, keep the lights full up.
One last point on this, I promise. Keep the lights fully up, great. But what if you're using a slide deck? Wouldn't that just drown out everything?
Oh, they might reply, people will see the slides better if we turn the lights off. And then I reply, it's extremely hard to see slides through closed eyelids.
I mean, sure, but there's so many other elements here, and it's a fun little joke, but you did not address the question, sir. You did not address that question. You just made a fun little jab. I remember I listened to some other public speaking expert, and he was talking about eye contact and be like, use enough so that it's effective, but not too much so it's creepy. And it's like, ha, ha, ha. But what are you supposed to take away from that? You did not answer the question, sir. It's like these fun little jokes that you can meet to be charismatic. And honestly, I mean, sure, it's great, but then follow it up with something solid because now every student here is going like, I guess I'm not using slides.
Place.
Or you say, that's why it's so important to have, let's say, maybe a dark slide with white writing, like a black slide with white writing, so that even in like low light, it's still legible. Or you do a white slide with big writing or dark, really dark writing. So that way, even if there's a lot of light, people can still see it. Wouldn't have that been a tactic? Okay, the next point he made was casing the place, which means like going and seeing where you're going to be speaking before you have to speak. And yes, 100% I agree with that. When I was in case competitions, whenever we showed up to the location to compete, we would always say, hey, can we go check out where we're speaking? Or can we see a classroom that looks as much as possible? And we would actually, here's the thing, it's not enough to go there and look. That's what he said, just go and make sure everything's okay. But what does make sure everything okay mean? Here's what we did. We would go to the classroom where we're speaking or the theater or whatever that we were speaking in, and we would figure out where can we stand to have the best view of the audience, and we would pick 2 or 3 places. So we would say, okay, the desk is here, so we can stand here, here, and here. Or there's 3 of us, so why don't we each pick one spot, but then we can all go forward here. Oh, there's the stairs. Here's judges are probably going to be here, so maybe we should, and we would figure out where we are going to speak, like specific spots, to be able to always be talking to the audience or talking to the judges. That's a good example of casing the place. He basically just said, go and check it out and make sure it's okay. But how do you make sure it's okay? Number one, that's that. Number two, plug in your PowerPoint or your presentation slides or test out the tech. 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 Just in case I haven't made this point clear, test out the tech. How often have you been in a presentation and the first couple of minutes are, oh no, okay, it was working before, or like, oh no, my computer's backing up. It's not connect. Well, guess what? That's the first impression you've given them. So say it with me. Test the tech. That's what casing the place means. So the next point that he made was that it should be reasonably occupied. So you should have a space that's not like too large for your audience or not too small for your audience. And again, I mean, sure, in theory, and this is the problem with all this theory. How are you going to control that? Maybe if you're setting up your own event. But here's the thing, 9 out of 10 times when we're presenting, we're doing webinars, we have zero control over that. Here's the space you're speaking in. And if 4 people show up and it's a 100-person theater, what do you do then? He doesn't talk about that. If 400 people show up and it's a 50-person space, what do you do then? He doesn't talk about that. So let me tell you what you do then. Number one, so what happens when you have like a 400-person space and 20 people show up? You make it sound like this is an opportunity. So here's what you do. You say, you know what? There's only a few of us here, but this is actually really awesome because now we can actually have a conversation. So everyone come down here. Yeah, just come down right at the very front. We're going to forget the formal presentation. I just want to teach you a few things. Let's talk a little bit. Grab some chairs. Let's make a circle. I'm going to sit in the row here too. Done. What happens if you have a 20-person space and 400 people show up? Then there's nothing you can do except give people a way to find out more. Hey, everyone, I'm very sorry. We are completely full, but I am going to record this session. I'm going to record this session and I will send an email out to everyone who registered. And you'll all at least be able to watch an e-version. Something like that. But control the size so that it's the right size for the amount of people. I mean, good theory, zero application. Poopy Pants McGee. I was so hoping so much more. This is MIT, dude. I'm throwing so much shade, aren't I? Okay, I wanted to jump in here. So he's spending a bunch of time talking about visuals now. He's saying, here's how you use the visuals. And one of the big things he says is when you're trying to like really connect with your audience, use a chalkboard. And the first thing is, how many places do you present in that have chalkboards nowadays? None. But maybe we can use dry erase boards for the same idea. Sure. Now, he says that the reason we want to do this is, for number one, it has a graphic quality. And he doesn't really explain what that means, except he kind of draws a line saying, see, I can make things graphical. Sure, if you can draw. I mean, maybe that's what he means right here. If you see, he's got that little oven thing, that's what it is. And he says the way you write is the speed at which most of us process information. And again, maybe that's true, but dude, I've been losing my mind sitting here watching you go like, question. Guess what? I didn't need that amount of time to know you were writing question. And if you've ever had to sit there and watch someone write stuff out, after a while, you're just like, oh my God, it takes forever. And the person even, you know what? I'm just going to talk instead. So I actually fully disagree with that point. And I think that point is, it just shows a lack of real understanding about how people process information. I'm sorry, Mr. Winston. If you want to challenge me on this, please let me know. But it has already happened several times where you're sitting there writing and I'm like, I get it. And if you were in a room, could you imagine writing out all the stuff? The next strategy he had, if you're not going to use a chalkboard, was using props. Don't use props. There you go. Don't use props. Unless you are demoing something. unless you are literally demoing something and you have practiced so much, do not use a prop, because most props are effective for about like a second to maybe make a joke or make a point, and then you don't know what to do with it. And then you end up talking with it the whole time, or you put it down and it's like, there's my prop. The only person I've ever seen use props well was this like amazing salesman who was like selling a computer, and he was like typing on it, like the computer's facing you and he was typing on it, is how well he knew this prop. And he would put it down most of the time and then talk. And then he'd go like this and he'd grab it and like, let me show you this. Most of us will use a prop like for like 1 second or to make one point, and then it's just useless. And 9 out of 10 times we don't need it. So just don't use props. If I'm wrong, hey, by the way, hey, if you're like, Yvonne, I have to do this and I think I need a prop, post it. Send me a message of an exact situation where you needed to use a prop or you think you should use a prop, and I will respond to it. Because, like I said, I'm not teaching rules, I'm teaching tools. So of course, there's always going to be exceptions. If you are ever doing anything in a presentation, any kind of interaction using any kind of props, any kinds of visuals, you need to include variation, because the more you repeat the same kind of tactic, the less engaging it becomes. It's like when on the Starship Enterprise, when they were fighting the Borg, and shame on you if you don't get this reference. Shame on you. Watch more Star Trek. They would use the laser on the guy and shoots the Borg. Every time they used the laser, they would adapt and adapt and adapt until the laser stopped working. The phaser, excuse me. Shows my Star Trek knowledge. And that's the exact same thing when you're doing things like writing on a chalkboard. If you're always writing on the chalkboard, it just becomes less and less effective every time. So you may be right, sir, but only partially. The first thing that he talks about with slides, he doesn't actually address the slide that he has above it, but here's what he did. He left it up there. My friends, right now, go into your PowerPoint or your Keynote or whatever you're using, run the presentation. Here's what he should have done. If you're running slides and it's actually running, not where you can change anything, but when it's the actual slideshow, push the B button and the screen will go black. Push the W button and the screen will go white. So what he should have done, and what you can do, is when you're using slides and you want to draw attention away from the slides and over to you, hit him with the B, push the B button. And everyone's going to go like this. And then when you want to draw attention back to the slide, you ask a question. It's like, so what does all that mean? What was the outcome? Push the B button again, and the slide pops back up. That's a way you can use slides effectively. The only other point he's really making is he told a story about a student who was like, could you retweet my slides? And he's like, yeah, there's too much stuff on it and there's too many slides. Half agree. A lot of us put too much information on a slide, but the number of slides doesn't matter. I know, controversial view, number of slides doesn't matter. My slide decks have like 70 slides in them, but most of them are like a picture, a question mark, 1 or 2 words, a sentence, a picture again, another question, a picture. And the whole time, the information is not actually stuff that's meant for you to read. It's meant to sound like I'm asking you the question. So it'll say, what does this mean? Question mark. Well, ... Look at this picture. Why am I showing you this question? And I make slides that actually talk to my audience. So there's a lot of slides, but not a lot of information. That's one strategy. At the very least, though, the only valid point he's made is that there's too much information on him. But will he tell us how to reduce the information? Okay, so now we're looking at some examples of slides. And yeah, of course, this is great. But let's see how he shows us how to make them better.
Well, for this demonstration, I need to be way over here.
First of all, though, this is such an old school played out slide deck. Like, who's going to make slides like that nowadays with the little pick art and stuff like that? I knew this this entrepreneurship coach, and who was quite accomplished. And he was teaching an entrepreneurship class at an MBA program. And in one of his first seminars, he's like, if you show me a slide deck with a bunch of pick art, like old school Microsoft pick art, you're failing this class. He's like, if that's the best you can do, you fail. That's it. I don't want you in the class. I was like, very audacious. I don't know if I would be that extreme, but it makes a point.
So how can we fix this? Step number one is to get rid of the background junk. That's always distraction. Step number two is to get rid of the words. When I reduced the words to these, then everything I read a previous time, I'm not licensed to say because it's not on the slide. I'm not reading my slides anymore, but I'm saying what was written on the slides in a previous example. So what else can we do to simplify this?
Okay, bravo. So here's finally like a tactic that maybe we can use. Do not read, be the image, keep images simple, eliminate clutter. Yeah, but like, okay, yes, again, theoretically, this is all correct. But how? So here's what I mean. Like this, whatever this image is like supposed to demo something. If it's not applicable to our day-to-day or the type of questions we're going to do, it's a useless example. So here's what you do. When he says keep images simple or be the image, here's what you do. Here's the rule. If you have an image on your slide, that image is the whole slide. It's not in the big, and here's this, it's the whole thing. The only thing people see is a photo. That's it. Maybe you can add one or two words, but that is it. If you're using an image, that image is the entire slide. There's one strategy for you. Eliminate clutter. What can you delete and say instead? What can you delete and say instead? Try and reduce the amount of words. For me, if I'm going to have like 2 or 3 bullets, 1 or 2 words per bullet. Go max 5 words. There's no rule here, but just roughly. In general, have a slide with like 1 or 2 bullets. Here is how you can make sure that you have the right number. It is impossible to not look at your slides. It really is. Unless you're using the same slide deck over and over and over, it's going to be impossible not to use your slides as your notes, okay? If the thing is in front of you, you're looking at it all the time. So make it so that your slides remind you what to say, not tell you what to say. So if you can just use one word to remind you about what you want to talk about, just put that one word on the slide. If you might need 2 or 3 words or a specific number that you need to remember, put that on the slide. That's how you keep the images simple.
Oh, we can get rid of the logos. We don't need them.
Oh, yeah. Get rid of logos. You don't need them. Yeah. 100% agree, sir.
What else can we do? Get rid of the title.
You know what would be awesome? If you were asking the audience these questions. Because I'm just going to say this. We're in a public speaking class, and it's been a half hour of you just talking uninterrupted. I think one or maybe 2 questions. What a great place to have some audience interaction to wake them up a little bit.
Now I want to talk to you about some rules for slide preparation. I'm telling you the title. It doesn't have to be up there.
Love that.
By reducing the number of words on the slide,
yeah,
I'm allowing you to pay more attention to me and less to what's written on the slide.
Or you push the B button every time you want them to look at you, so the slide goes black, and then you push the B button again every time you want them to look at the slide, because then it pops up. So he tells a story about a student who experimented between saying half the stuff and showing half the stuff and then reversing it. And basically what happened is people retained the stuff that they read better than listening to them because they had to ignore him in order to read it. That's the point he made. If there's a lot of information on the slide, I have to make a choice as the audience to either ignore you or ignore what's written on the slide. And that's a very valid point. See, I'm not all like, you're terrible. That's a good point. So he's talking about fonts sizing. And for this one, there's no rule. There's no rule. You just got to figure out what's best for you. Here's the thing though, if you minimize your words, if you minimize the amount of words on the slide to like 2 or 3 words, they can be huge. They can be huge. Guy Kawasaki says, no less than 30. It's a good rule, roughly 30 or more. So one interesting thing that's happening here is a before and after, and he's talking about making slides that are too heavy. So I'm going to show you real quick. That's his example of slides that are too heavy. And I agree, like everyone would look at this and be like, oh my God, there's way too much information on these slides. But we don't see slides like this that much anymore. People are kind of a bit more sophisticated. These slides look like they're from like 1999. What would have been cool is if you gave us some slides from last year and said, so here's some slide decks from last year or from a couple of years ago, because this is 2019 he's doing this. Then he's following it up with a picture of the slides that he used in a recent presentation. And these are great with a couple of things though, couple of things here. For example, like they look fine, but you see that they look kind of like cut and pasty, you know, they don't have that air of like professionalism, that air of like sophistication. And here's all you would have needed to have done that. You almost did it right here. If you guys look at the bottom where he's drinking his coffee, if you're going to use an image, one image per slide, and that image is the whole slide. When you put this image here or all these people here or this thing where it's like there's all this white space, why not expand it or make it so it fits the entire slide? That's what makes your slides look really professional. That's like the TED Talk, like, ooh, sophisticated. It's just a nice quality picture. So when you have, like, if you look at this one with like right beside the skeletons here, that was probably an animation. Don't use animations because they always mess up if you switch to different computers and stuff like that. But you could have just had one picture, or each slide is its own picture, and then quickly scroll through them, because then it really pops. So what happened next is he went through a bunch of examples that were like really funny, kind of over the top examples of like his crimes. Again, in terms of like location and in terms of place, what you do with your body language, etc. And they were fine, but again, they were just like so obvious that they didn't relate to reality in the same way that I think you could probably have done it. You could have talked about, like, you know, if you have this class, you're like, so gang, you're all going to be presenting in this room. You know, that's something you could have done. Also, we're about 40 minutes in. Ask one more question since then. There's people who he's saying some things that he doesn't want answers to because he keeps talking, and you can hear people saying stuff. Why not let them say stuff? It means they want to get involved. Oh, it's time for a pet peeve alert. It's time for a pet peeve alert. The next thing he talks about is how to inspire people. And he says, you know, you got to inspire people by speaking with passion. And this is such a huge pet peeve of mine, because sure, if you're trying to be a motivational speaker or you're a teacher, but how? Like, no kidding, it's important to speak with passion. But how am I supposed to be passionate about my quarterly sales meeting? How am I supposed to be passionate if I'm doing a training session on how to use a new kind of walkie-talkie? If you want to inspire people, certainly, I mean, that's a great goal to have, to be passionate about stuff. But 9 out of 10 times, the things we're speaking on, we're not passionate about. Or they don't like, it'd be weird to be passionate about it. So instead, here's how you inspire people. You get them to do stuff so they see the result for themselves. Have activities in your presentation. Get them to demo something so that they really learn it. Because if they watch you do it and then they do it, they really learn it. And then they are more likely to do it afterward. That is how you inspire people, by getting them to do it and they can see the results for themselves. Oh, God, I speak with passion. God, I hate that. Okay, I wanted to touch on this point because he's talking about how to be persuading as a faculty candidate. And he talked about he was at this conference with all these amazing people. And he basically says, and it's another little pet peeve. He says, you know, he asked them, what do they need to do in order to be considered by you to be a faculty candidate? And he says that everyone said they need to have vision and they need to have done something. Neither of those things have anything to do with your presentation. How do you communicate your vision, and how do you communicate what you've done in a way that's going to make it impactful? Like, everyone says things like that, you know, have a vision, have an idea to share, get them inspired, demonstrate your value, show them like what you've done. Yeah, but how do you structure it? How do you do these things? Let me give you one example, because he's not going to. Here's what you do. Number one, do your presentation, okay, with decreasing time. Do your presentation, time it. If it took 5 minutes, boom, cut it down to 2 minutes. Took 2 minutes, then cut it down to a minute, then cut it down to 30 seconds, and then max 10 words. And right away, you will find a key statement that's going to have impact, which should communicate your vision. And that's the first couple of sentences. That's one of the things you say. And then you repeat that one sentence throughout your presentation. Do it 2 or 3 times within the first few minutes, because otherwise you're going to lose their attention. And now he's saying that, you know, along with this, you got to show them that you're doing something new, something different. Yes. How? Like, everybody knows these things. These are things that we could find I'm at MIT. Do a search for like public speaking how to make a good speech, how to persuade people. You're going to see this stuff on every single thing on the first page of Google. What value are you giving me here with these ideas if there is no follow through on tactics, man? Ah! Ah! Okay, honestly, at this point, I'm just like fast forwarding through stuff because I don't think there's any value here. But there is one thing that I want to talk about, and it's the thing I mentioned. Having a slogan, having that 10 words that really identifies your presentation, and repeating it throughout your presentation. He didn't say that, but I'm just saying that's one point that he's making that I agree with. Think about it like this. When you are designing your vision, your slogan, literally think of billboards. Find billboards and see what they do and copy it. And here's what they do. They have an image, one image, and it's the entire billboard, and then either a question or a couple of words. And that is enough to prove a point. And that's how you can define a slogan. But here's the thing. The best billboards are the ones where there's more than one. Pet peeve alert, pet peeve alert.
You're a fantastic speaker. What's your secret? And he said, oh, I always finish with a joke, and that way people think they've had fun the whole time.
If anyone is teaching, if anyone is out there teaching you how to do public speaking and they say use a joke, be cautious. I want to say run away, but there's always exceptions. Because here's the thing, technically correct. And that example of that really great speaker that ends with a joke, or him who's obviously uses the same joke every single time. How easy is it to be funny when you're nervous? How easy is it to be funny when you're doing a technical presentation, which sometimes we have to do? How often have you seen someone crack some sort of a joke in a presentation? You get, That's your advice for how to end a presentation? Come on. The way you end a presentation, how can you give me a tactic? That's a funny little anecdote, great story, changes no behavior. Just a fun little thing. I said, if you're teaching all these people to make a joke and they all do it, 9 out of 10 people are going to bomb. And so 9 out of 10 people are going to, and that'll be their lasting impression. Instead, here's a simple strategy to have a good, solid ending. Recap your key points. Cool. Have a call to action. Cool. Just make a reference to your opening so people feel like they've gone full circle. That's it. Whatever the first couple of sentences are, perhaps it's those 10 words you found that you opened with, and with that key slogan, the key walkaway, the thing you want them to remember and repeat to everyone else. And if you do that, friends, you will always have a more effective presentation. So, dear friends, I'm going to end off by saying this. Watching this video was not about criticizing this man or this class. Watching this video was about seeing if we could take these ideas and give them substance. If we could take these anecdotes and give them tactics. If we could take this theory and turn it into tools that we can apply in our next presentation. And I think we did. So thank you so much for watching. This was a long one. I know this was a long one. #and boring. You made it through. So did I. And we will see you next time. Bye, team.